Welcome very, very much to the Times Higher Education and Blackboard Roundtable discussion for Australia and New Zealand. Today we are really thrilled to be joined by Carol Miles, Senior Curriculum Management Architect representing Blackboard. And today we're going to be talking about digitizing the management of university curricula for continuous course improvement. My name is Joyce Lau. I am the TG Asia editor, and Carol and I will be moderating this talk today. Just to give you a brief rundown, we're going to have a little introduction from Carol, and then we're going to go through about 6 topics related to digital curriculum management, spend about 10 minutes per topic. You will see on your screen a little hands up sign. So we want this to be a really open discussion, a roundtable discussion. So please do feel, if you want to just jump in, have a question or comment, either raise your hand or use the little raised hand sign. So I'm going to just hand over to Carol for a few minutes so she can introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Carol Miles. As Joyce said, I work with Blackboard and Akari as Senior Curriculum Management Architect, which is a very big, long, fancy term for somebody who supports the development of curricular systems and specifically digitizing curriculum for Australian universities, New Zealand universities. Today, we thought it would be very exciting to spend a little bit of time talking about the power of a digitized curriculum management system in allowing us to pursue that continuous course improvement that we're all really interested in, and to find different ways to access that data as best we can. But before we get started, would we perhaps be able to turn on our cameras and briefly introduce ourselves? We're a fairly small group. Also, for anyone not familiar with using Collaborate, I might just mention that there is, over on the right-hand bottom side, there are a couple of things of interest. One of them is the attendees, which will show you who's here. And also there is a chat. So if you want to say something in the chat in the background, we will be keeping an eye on that as well. As Joyce mentioned, you can raise your hand. You certainly aren't required to. Feel free, if you want, to just turn on your microphone and jump in. If you'd like to see everybody, if you go to the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a little thing that looks like a screen with 3 squares under it. It says Change View. If you click on Gallery View, that will give you the majority of people that are here. When your mic turns on, if you've got your video on, then your video will come on, and we will see you. So how does that sound? Maybe if we could get started. I'm just looking around the screen. Would someone like to jump in and introduce themselves, or shall we kind of go through the list? Fleur, you're at the top of the list. Why don't you go ahead?
Kia ora koutou, katoa. I'm Fleur Connor-Douglas. I'm the Director of Curriculum Transformations at Massey University. Now I have to put my hand up and say this is my 2nd day in the job. So I'm really happy to see both Giselle and Jenny here as familiar faces, and may well be doing more listening than speaking today.
Welcome. Jeff. I'm just going down the participant list of this.
Yuma, Darawa Nuna, Darawa Nunawal. So hello everyone, I'm here on Ngunnawal land, and I'm Deputy Vice Chancellor Academic here at the University of Canberra.
Welcome, Jeff. Giselle.
Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Giselle Burns, and I'm the Provost at Te Kuninga ki Purihorua, Massey University in New Zealand. And I'm delighted to see my colleagues Fleur and Jenny here today. Really looking forward to the discussion. In my role, I'm responsible for leading the teams around curriculum transformation, curriculum development, and academic quality assurance. Kia ora.
Thank you, Giselle. Jenny.
Kia ora tātou, ko Jenny Poskett Tokuhanga. So I also work at Massey University on the Palmerston North campus. We have 3 campuses in New Zealand. So I work there with Giselle and Fleur. My role is currently Director of College Projects in the College of Humanities Social Sciences. I also still am an academic in the Institute of Education. So I come, I suppose, wearing a couple of hats actually. One is a quality assurer. My expertise is in assessment, but also as an academic who uses a lot of these programs to make changes and improvements to our academic offerings. Kia ora, welcome, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Lisa. We may skip Lisa for the moment. How about if we go to Marie?
Thanks very much, Carol. I'm here today on our Norma Barter campus in Cairns in far north Queensland on Jabberkai land. My role is Deputy Vice-Chancellor Students. Underneath my portfolio, I am engaged with all curriculum matters through to the review cycles and quality assurance. So thanks, and interested in the discussion.
Thanks very much, Marie. Lisa, if you'd like to introduce
Hi,
yourself.
apologies, just a few technical issues there. My name's Lisa Campion, and I'm the Manager of Academic Quality and Standards at Edith Cowan University in Western Australia.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Peter.
Hi everyone, Peter Cook. I'm from Southern Cross University. I'm the Associate Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Students on the beautiful Gold Coast. And I must say, as I look out the window and the waves are rolling, just for everyone to know, it is a beautiful part of the world on Yungabear lands as well.
Okay, Pip.
Hi, I'm Pip Patterson, Deputy Vice-Chancellor Education at the University of Sydney. We've been on a digitisation of the curriculum journey for a little while now.
You have.
I am currently on Wurundjeri land. I have escaped to Victoria, for which I'm grateful, and avoiding the Sydney lockdown, in Melbourne instead. So looking forward to this. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Welcome, Pip. And Tim.
Galango Jali, Natu Banagu Gobari, Gabi Gabi Mine. So I'm Tim West, I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor from University of the Sunshine Coast, the even more beautiful University of the Sunshine Coast, and Deputy Vice Chancellor, academic, very interested to listen and learn today.
Excellent. Well, welcome everyone. As I mentioned, I'm in Newcastle, so I'm on Awabakal land currently. And what we're going to do today, I guess, is open it up. Joyce, would you like me to do a bit of a brief introduction to the first larger question? I think we're very lucky today to have some people who have gone, as Pip has mentioned, quite a way down the journey of curriculum management. Also our colleagues at Massey and Sunshine Coast, to discuss really how, when we digitize our curriculum, we can support the constructive alignment of the evaluation of our courses and our assessments. And I think some of that is around the ability to take all of our different items of curriculum and put them in one large data warehouse, essentially, because as we know, curriculum management systems are large databases, and it helps us see the whole of a curriculum. I don't know if someone would like to start to address that.
Oh, Giselle?
Giselle, please go ahead.
Kia ora. Yes, I'm happy to comment on that because Massey is a little way down this journey. We engaged with Blackboard Akari probably 2 to 3 years ago and started the journey pre-COVID of stepping into the curriculum management space. For a university like ours, which is a long time distance education provider, for more than 50 years we've been teaching in distance and blended mode as well as face-to-face. COVID accelerated that significantly. But prior to COVID, we were very concerned that we aligned what was taught in the classroom with what we had approved in terms of our governance processes. So if I can just kick it off, Carol, one of the big benefits that we have seen has been the alignment of what happens in reality in the classroom with what is approved. And you cannot underestimate the cultural transformation that is required in that process. So it's not simply a matter of creating the kind of super database, which effectively is what the CM system is, but it's also ensuring that academic autonomy is respected, but by the same token, so are academic governance decisions. And as we all know, there can often be some creep between what's approved and what is taught. And the CM system has allowed us to effectively communicate to our academics and to our students the expectations. And that's been a real benefit. So I'll just say those comments to kick it off, Carol.
Okay, great. I think, Pip, did you want to?
Yes, thanks. I was just going to say, I think we did things backwards, I'm told. We did curriculum mapping first. So I'll talk about the benefits of that because we're still on the curriculum management journey. But a key benefit of, well, two I'll mention. One is we've been able to deliver much richer curriculum content to students before they actually start a class by publishing quite detailed unit of study outlines. Students absolutely love that. So that's been a real benefit, and it's been relatively easy, although it did need a lot of work first time round. The second benefit is just having the curriculum in digital form. So we're doing a lot of work on assessment at the moment, being able to capture quantitatively and in a sort of common format all of the different assessment modalities and the extent to which they're used and how they're used. That has been fantastic.
Could I ask a bit of a follow-up question on that, Pip? Are you finding this helpful as far as the, and I know we had a point somewhere along here, but I think that whole point about assessment, my own personal area of interest is authentic assessment, and how that has helped you address any kind of issues around academic integrity as far as the assessment is concerned.
I'd say not directly at this stage, but that might be because we haven't been clever enough. What it has helped us understand is the degree and nature of over-assessment, which of course does possibly feed into educational integrity issues. And that's been immensely helpful, and it's allowed staff in the university to see at an aggregate level what we're asking students to do, which is just way too much.
Absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
So, Fleur?
I was going to add to that. Also, it allows us to see not only over-assessment, but also variety of assessment and assessment type in a glance. And as a Te Tiriti-led institution, as we are at Massey, we are looking to be able to authentically assess a wide variety of students in diversity. And you know, it is quite a shock to programs when they actually see, oh, you know, officially and by, you know, what's approved, we're assessing this program through the means of essay. You know, let's say, when that's actually up in front of you and you can see that right across, you can actually start having an inroads into the discussions for change and culture change, as Giselle mentioned, being a big part of this discussion. And it's where our teams sort of are workshopping and working with the teaching teams, and all of these levers in are really important.
Peter, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just really quickly, two things. We at Southern Cross are in the middle of a curriculum reform process, which is leading us to 6 equal terms they're being called, which has gone from 3 sessions or trimester form, but why I actually mentioned this in the process of digitising everything into this, it's become even more necessary for students just in time to just receive everything more quickly and efficiently. So obviously the digital processing that goes with that sort of lives quite co-aligned. And the second thing is that I've got a responsibility for co-curricula within SEU. So what we are probably doing, we've just gone through a fairly extensive efficacy review of learning support measures, which the digitisation of that co-curricular is paramount, and seeing the effect of what we're actually doing and how it interplays, not just with wider course evaluations, but also about retention and attrition figures. So there's a lot in this space, I think, that's quite timely.
Peter, thank you so much. I think, Jenny, would you like to add something?
Thank you. I think for us at Massey, where we've got some really good packages, the challenge, and I'm interested to hear if this is the challenge for you in Australian universities too, is actually what I'd call connectedness. And by this, there's a couple of aspects. One is system connectedness with multiple systems. So for example, it's very easy to tell when students submit assignments in our Moodle version, which is Stream, when they have, you were talking before about academic integrity, if they have not referenced things appropriately or adopted or copied rather than adapted references, etc. We can see that very easily, but it doesn't necessarily connect in directly, well, it doesn't actually, with curriculum management systems. So there is a challenge from an academic point of view anyway. Giselle may have another perspective of how those systems connect and talk to each other. But even more so in the element of connectedness is people connectedness. And by this I mean that really the systems can be very good, but they're only as good as the staff who work with them. And with the staff, they need not only time to use them, but the skill and the inclination to reflect on what the data is telling them, and then to do something with it, to do something about it. So I think with moving on to the next sort of question, I suppose, connecting through, is the feedback loops. I think it's the connectedness amongst the different software packages that we have, so connectedness at that level, but also connectedness amongst people, so that staff have the time, the skill and inclination. And thirdly, with the other systems or processes that we have in a university. So for us, the academic decision making, and that's through from it, obviously academic board for us in New Zealand is the key academic regulators and decision makers, but they also delegate to a number of other layers, and I don't know if it's the same for you, such as academic committees and college boards, etc. But they feed down to people, academic staff, who may enter the information related to their course or their program, but it's there are checks and balances for quality of people at different layers through it, but it's also everyone having an understanding of how that connection or how the whole system connects and talks, and how we can influence it for improvement. So those are just a couple of points I'd like to raise. Thank you.
Jenny, thank you so much, and I'm really glad that you brought up checks and balances and connectivity, because that brings us to our first topic, which is how can digitizing curricula support and align the evaluation of courses and programs. Carol, I don't know if you want to kick that off. Oh, I think you're muted.
I think it's very much what we've been talking about right now, which is how between the people and the systems connect together. One thing I thought that was interesting, Giselle said at the very beginning, that I think might be worth exploring here, and it's also, very much the concept of the feedback loops, is, Giselle, you said something about this requires a huge cultural shift. What is that cultural shift, and how do we start to make it happen?
Yeah, kia ora, Carol. I think it occurs on a few different levels, and one point to make is just coming off the back of Jenny's comments about the need for checks and balances. The other thing I would add to that is the need for us to be student-centred and to think about the user experience. Now, in a university, that might sound incredibly self-evident, but for most of our history, universities have not been particularly student-focused in terms of how we arrange our teaching, how we design it often, and then the mediums on which and through which we engage with students and deliver learning experiences. So I think that has required something of a pivot, to use an overused word, from 2020. But the main observation that I would make, Carol, is that we all know that in the academy, many of our colleagues consider teaching to be something of a private enterprise. Most academics see themselves as contracted entrepreneurs to the university in which they operate. And I say that as someone who spent more than 20 years teaching.
Absolutely.
So when you step into the world of, big databases and big data and software as a service, that all becomes not only open to scrutiny and checking, but also it's verified and it has to be a stable data set. What we've seen there is that there's been not so much pushback in terms of accountability from the academic community, but I think initially a sense of, a little bit of exposure, a little bit of the checks and balances have been very important to validate that what is approved through the academic governance processes actually is delivered in the classroom or online. And I think in many ways the shift to online has exacerbated and highlighted that because it shows very graphically, whether you're in 100% online or in a blended mode, that what you teach and how you teach and with whom you teach, and that includes peer-to-peer learning, by the way, that's much more visible and transparent. So I think to answer your question, Carol, it's been that shift from thinking about teaching as a private endeavour to one that is actually owned by the institution, if I can put it like that, in a very kind of bald descriptor.
Thanks, Giselle. I think that's very apt. One of the things that we've seen looking at curriculum management is really how you have some form of objective data where you're not just asking schools and faculties to ask their academics what they're doing. You have an overview of that. Pip.
Yeah, just pursuing the sort of concept of student-centeredness, which I think is absolutely crucial. I think one of the main reasons we went down the path of curriculum mapping first was actually to make the curriculum visible, not just to students, but also to teachers, because when staff are teaching in a program, it's not and pursuing the sort of the sole trader model, they're not doing their own thing. They're presenting a part of a coherent package of learning, which is actually the degree in which they're embedded. At least we hope it's coherent. So actually having visibility of one another's curricula is absolutely vital to being able to do that.
Tim, you had a comment as well.
Just to add to that about, I suppose we've had a thing called the Curriculum Information Management System or repository for a while. Well, no, sorry, it's really just been over the last 6 months that it's been brought in. What it reveals, going back to Pip's point, is that you can find out, can you get a whole degree by multiple choice questions? If everybody else doesn't know that everybody else is, that's what everybody else thinks. Somebody must be setting a project or something, but no. But also what I've been amazed at is the amount of requests in the first instance of people wanting to change courses and programs on the hoof. At University of Sunshine Coast, I found that it's less nefarious than where I came from previously, which I won't mention, where in terms of workload, people would say, and you're talking about over assessing, it would look like staff would get a deal of workload for the assessments that they were saying, and then would scrap the assessments but keep the workload assigned in their back pocket. And that was really, that was something that it only began to reveal when you began to do the mapping and had a repository that staff could not go in and change assessment items semester by semester.
Wow. And some of that even speaks to the question that Jeff had asked in the chat about quantitative and qualitative return on investment benefits, is when you're at a point where your workload is now being addressed as well. Fleur.
I was just going to come in really after Giselle and Pip were talking about the culture change and thinking of the role the unit or the course actually plays in the curriculum as a larger program is so important. And I found working on the ground with staff, as our teams do, quite foreign to many people thinking about it over the larger, unless it's a cohort program. If it's teaching, if it's vet, if it's nursing, yeah, there's struggles, but there's much more of a focus. But so I guess what I'm adding into that is that we have to think about the development of our teaching teams in this space as well. There's actually quite a lot of education that needs to go on, and there's a lot of embedded development that goes along when teams work like this across the curriculum, whether that's a unit or a course, or even more so across a program. And it's incredibly beneficial when you actually start seeing people and individuals that you've worked with actually being able to spread that practice. The other thing that I was going to just mention as well is the need for actual processes and systems that work on a more day-to-day or semester by semester, year by year model that actually back up the curriculum remaining true and as it was designed, because things just shift and change so easily underneath what the regulation is. Not quite saying what Tim was talking about in terms of that being quite so intentional, but even if just assessment changes in design underneath, it can actually make quite a massive change to the whole.
That is very true. That is very true. Jenny, you wanted to add?
Yes, just building on what Fleur and Tim had said, with the capacity or not for individual staff to change things. I think what we see in some of these systems is a tension between flexibility and responsiveness to the industry, profession, society, etc., versus a systematic approach, and particularly if we're looking at a university-wide kind of process that these systems allow. So there's an opportunity. So somewhere in between there is the ideal solution, and it may change depending on the issue. But I just think that these systems allow us and allow particularly academics to think beyond their own course, as people have said, to program level. So it allows that curriculum management and curriculum mapping. It allows for program level decisions, like I think it was Jeff or someone said about suddenly realizing that the whole degree is assessed through multiple choice type items. So if we can use it and view it as program level developments and changes, then I think it can optimize student learning and be student-centered, as Giselle said, because it allows us to have that medium-term link between often academics' short-term changes and the university strategic plans, but to have that medium-level development and continuous improvement, because when we look across a program, we can see whether there is connection and, if you like, validity between what the graduate profile says and indeed what is taught and how it is assessed in programs. So I think the real advantage and the leverage we've got with using these digital systems is a program level approach to improvement for students and for staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Giselle.
Kia ora. Look, I just endorse what Jenny's just said and amplify that further by referring to a couple of things. One is the importance and imperative of academic development, support for teaching staff, for whom the existence of a curriculum management system and product actually stretches their capability and capacity. And the positive is encouraging colleagues to think in a program view rather than a course-by-course view, which, as others have said, is hugely advantageous. But it really puts up front and central the importance of good curriculum design and pedagogy, and that's why we're very fortunate to have Fleur and her team, who are absolute experts in that, literally sitting at the elbow of our academics, our teachers. The other thing I'd like to state too, which is a slightly different topic, Carol, is around the way in which a curriculum management system can provide timely responses to new opportunities. So some of our Australian colleagues on the call today may not be aware that here in New Zealand, whilst we are independent universities, we're not self-accrediting. So we have to go through a national committee of all of the other New Zealand universities. There are 8 in total, and get sign-off from those other universities before we want to put any product out there. That adds time to our internal quality assurance and approval processes. So it's really important that we've got the ducks lined up internally in terms of our internal platforms and systems. So time to market, opportunity to review is another very, very critical part of this discussion, and then that happens particularly in the academic governance space. So I just want to throw that in there because that may not be known to Australian colleagues on the call today.
Thank you, Giselle. I think this leads us to our next issue, which is how can we optimize assessment formats by analyzing the relationships between learning outcomes and the assessments themselves? Excuse me, Carol, would you like to?
Yeah, I think we've largely covered that when we've looked at sort of aggregating all of our different courses and having a look over an entire program at what the different assessments are. We have got some clients here in Australia who've done some really good work with their business intelligence systems, and I know a number of you have done similar, where they're really creating dynamic heat map type outputs to look at on any given program, degree program, for example, how many different assessments are in each year or at each level. I think you mentioned, I think it was Fleur that mentioned that when you've got a cohort group like nursing or education, we tend to be fairly on top of not trying to have too many crashes and clashes with assessments and trying to spread things out. When you have students, though, in a more self-directed program, they can sometimes run into an area where my own personal area of interest in authentic assessment is I'm on a bit of a witch hunt right now, I'll be absolutely honest, against the academic essay. And those of you in the humanities will disagree with me more than other areas, I understand. But what I mean by the academic essay, and I think it's worth a bit of an exploration, is that in-text referenced thing that has the same rubric no matter what the subject is. And the student spends more time referencing APA than they do writing the essay, etc. So I think it's really important in that area, and this is where we got into academic integrity, is that if you've got a program that's got a lot of standard generic essays involved in the program, that's where it gets very easy for students to go to a contract cheating facility and buy an essay, as compared to authentic types of assessment, which you're all more than aware of. So I think that's part of the assessment benefit. The other part of it, as I mentioned before, and I'll hand it back to colleagues, is that the objectivity of whatever your digitized curriculum management system is gives you a certain amount of backup when you're making arguments around things like courses that maybe need to be retired, because you've done a very, very thorough look and you've seen that, well, the classic one is that you've got 32 research methods courses. That was somewhere that I worked. We had 32 research methods courses, and they all had the exact same learning outcomes. Those types of things are very obvious when you've digitized your system and are very hard to find out otherwise. I don't know what other types of things you may have experienced in a similar way. And that was the academic integrity bit that
Well, and I just want to follow up on the issue of academic integrity and whether that can be maintained through rich analysis of the assessment models. And I don't know if anyone has any feelings about that. Yes, Tim.
Well, I suppose that, so I must come over as incredibly cynical in this, but it was always checking the turnover authentic assessment as well, which is what I want to be able to see occurring. When I find that somebody is given the same assessment 5 times in a row, that just begs the opportunity for lots of forms of cheating. But going back to the point about essays, it's what's fit for purpose as well. And I had a vet school at one point, and people were giving vets essays, and I was saying they're never going to write an essay in their career after this, and they were complaining about the amount of time that they were spending marking essays. Well, stop setting them essays, set them case studies, because that's what they will be writing. They won't be writing essays the moment they've left here to be a vet. So, but yeah, authentic testing. I guess that what I used to do when my children used to go to parties and I'd have to come pick them up at 3 in the morning on a Saturday, stone cold sober, is I'd just get onto Blackboard and go through sites and just check whether the assessments had been changed, and write to people. They hated it if my kids went to a party because they knew that I'd be sitting there just going through Blackboard very early on a Sunday morning. That's the kind of thing we've got to, if a digital system can actually make us aware of when things have been updated. And that's the balance between allowing academics access to these programs, to a curriculum repository for the right reasons, but also but not so they can go and change it for the wrong personal reasons.
Jenny, would you like to add something?
Yes, in terms of assessment, thank you. Look, if we are really thinking about preparing our students for 21st century and beyond, if we're thinking of preparing them for citizenship and for the workplace where there's real world problems to solve, we need to be broadening the types of assessments that we are setting, because not only do they need the knowledge, they need to be able to know how to apply it, when to apply it, in people-friendly, responsive ways. So we need evidence of capabilities, particularly in the interpersonal space, and a lot of ethical matters, and we can certainly see the need for that around the world. So I think we do need to, these systems allow us to see the range of assessments, but also in the curriculum mapping, to hand on heart look at our graduate profiles and see, are we actually teaching those aspects, and are we actually assessing to authentically graduate our students with those capabilities? So I think we can optimize these systems. Let's use them to enhance the student and staff experience by looking at the range of assessments and using the feedback loops. And I think the key point that has been made too is to align it and connect it with systems of support for staff, so that you have people, facilitators who can expand their knowledge and application of pedagogies so that those improvements can be made. It's one thing to tell staff they need to do it, it's actually helping and having systems to support them to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a brief tangent to Jeff's question in the chat box about contract cheating. My colleague at THE, Karen Liu, she reports on China. We're seeing actually more sophisticated cheating, especially online, because there are companies that do this, and they are even going beyond essays and doing other types of cheating. I just wanted to throw that out there because, you know, as universities' technology improves, so does technology of some of these cheating companies. It's really a very alarming thing that we've been seeing, and I know that many universities in Australia and New Zealand actually do have a lot of foreign students who are online and who may be engaging in behavior that's not very good. Pip.
Yes, there's definitely a space on in the cheating ecosystem. I wanted to come back to the question of that Jenny raised about the sort of assessment of broader qualities. That is something we've very much tried to do in our use of curriculum mapping. We adopted a sort of broad set of what we call graduate qualities a few years ago, in fact back in 2016, and these have been embedded in the course, you know, program level learning outcomes for all courses, and they're mapped against each unit of study. We haven't quite yet got to the point of sort of really exploiting this, but it is very useful if, say, we want to understand how we're going and the development of any one of them. Take cultural competence as an example, which is very much front of mind at the moment. We can see where and how that's being developed and assessed through the curriculum, and that's actually a very useful thing to be able to do, and it really supports program oversight teams in understanding what they do and thinking about whether there's a better way of doing it. We actually think there needs to be another step in that sort of program of work, which is actually to develop some assessment tasks which really do measure the things that we're keen to develop, and we've kind of down the track of developing rubrics to gauge students' progress against these things. But the design of those tasks on a regular basis at particular points in the curriculum is not an easy change process, and it's something that we're sort of taking fairly slowly and doing in quite a research-rich way, so that we can gather evidence along the way of its doability and feasibility and understand the implications of it. But I just think it is a really important thing that we as universities should be doing, and we are having a go at it, and curriculum mapping certainly helps us do that.
Fleur, you had a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to say us also, Pip, and actually allowing students to evidence that journey is really important. So, you know, portfolio pedagogies, in fact, are a way of doing that, and actually reflecting on the journey of this, because of course everyone's going to start in these qualities and attributes in different places as well, and being able to judge where you're at as a learner entering into this journey and being able to evidence it in a way that's appropriate to you as a student, and also to your pathways important. And I think that when we talk about this within our programs and our work that we're doing, we're often looking at that as a natural way to design out the possibility for cheating or you know, for those issues, and I do think that giving opportunity, for students to show their whole journey is important in the ups and downs of that.
Giselle.
Yeah, just thank you. Just in praise of authentic assessment to support what Fleur's just shared. I mean, one of the things that our discussion today is really amplifying is that universities have made that transition from being repositories of content to being curators of knowledge in a context and an ecology where information is ubiquitous. And we need to do that with a constant cadence of accountability. So the shift towards authentic assessment in a world where the essay still may have its place, Carol, in certain disciplines, you know, if we can, you know, think about some of the challenges it presents, but some of the skills it also develops there as well. I do think that the more we think about our roles as research-intensive, research-informed teaching and learning communities, our role is to create graduates who will get jobs, who will create jobs for others. We're really looking at growing and developing those thinking skills, those creative skills. And that goes to that loop around what the role that assessment plays in our learning experiences. And also actually, and this is particularly relevant for a university like Massey University, where many of our students, up to 50%, are part-time mature age students, is peer-to-peer learning. And that's something that I think we don't pay enough attention to sometimes in terms of the cultural and intellectual capital that students bring with them into the virtual or the real classroom. Kia ora.
Thank you, Giselle. I'm really glad that you brought up job creation, because there's one thing that we haven't quite touched on yet, it's quite new, which is this idea of micro-credentials, which are so important for universities that are becoming more flexible and are trying to reach out to a broader base of students. So maybe I can just throw out there a question of whether we can integrate micro-credentials into curricula to maximize both business and learning outcomes from your existing courses. Carol, would you like to start?
I think where people are seeing benefits with micro-credentialing, and I think all of the digitized curriculum management solutions are now very much focused on micro-credentials because it's the thing that everyone is pursuing madly. I think one of the benefits really come with a digitized system comes down to very detailed mapping and the ability to pick and choose certain even topics from within a particular course, and I know we all have different language around courses and units and things, but to create micro awards of different forms from already well vetted and mapped materials, so that one can go in and perhaps take one course from here and another course from here and create something new that I know a lot of universities are looking toward for entry, for entry points, and to get more students interested in attending. Giselle.
Yeah, thanks, Carol. Look, I think the real benefit in that regard is recognition of prior learning and the mapping potential from micro-credentials through to accredited programs of study. Here in New Zealand, there are not as many commercial and financial incentives for a provider to develop micro-credentials. We effectively have to offer those as fee-for-service. So they need to be quite distinct from our quality assured programs and qualifications that we normally offer. And the other thing is, Carol, I'd say there is a discussion that we need to have as we step into micro-credentials more ambitiously around the proportionality of what's the future of the degree? What's the relative attractiveness of micro-credentials? As I say, we're not as well developed here in New Zealand as in Australia. We're a little bit nervous about stackability. The micro-credentials that have tended to fly in the market have been very much highly applied skill sets and knowledge packages, largely in the vocational education and training sector, or in terms of the professional development sector. So a little bit of water to flow under the bridge here in New Zealand on that, but I'll just come back to my key point around mapping and around RPL and the possibilities around that.
Jeff, did you want to expand at all on what you just said in the chat around definitions of micro-credentials and badges? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I think it's very interesting
No, thanks, Carol. It's just that we've been having lots of discussions here, as all your universities would be as well. And of course, our academics want everything. They want everything to be for credit and then not for credit at the same time. They want everything to have assessment but not have assessment all at the same time. They don't want the micro-credentials to go through the quality assurance processes within the university. So that's the sort of stuff we've been dealing with. So I've tried to, well, we have tried to come up with a definition that basically says if we're going to call it a micro-credential, then it will be designed and go through our quality assurance processes, and it will have guaranteed credit associated with it, and it will be priced accordingly, and there will be assessment associated with it. Whether a participant chooses to do the assessment or whether they choose to get the guaranteed credit is up to them. But from a point of view of designing it and the quality assurance around it, I just think there's clarity if we do something, well, along these lines. It doesn't have to be exactly this, but this is about getting clarity here. And then we can have things which are badges or some other term, whatever you want to use, for all the short sort of professional development stuff or other bits and pieces you want to put together, which are not for credit, but they're not excluded from RPL. The difference is a micro-credential is guaranteed credit, whereas a badge, you would have, a participant would have to then make a case as to why that maps against particular learning outcomes, or and they'd have to apply specifically for credit for that. So anyway, that's the approach we've taken at the moment.
Thank you. Marie, did you want to expand perhaps a little bit on your, sounds like you're doing something very similar?
Yeah, thank you. Very similar, just trying to explore the for credit, not for credit lines of things, Jeff, in a shorter form credential procedure, so that then the for credit does have the QA, but they're giving the flexibility of anything that's not for credit to potentially have some aggregation and some freedoms into what could be RPL, go through the normal RPL process, or have a capability of some aggregation only to a minimum circumstance. But there has to be an alignment to some freedoms that you might give within a course structure as a general elective, as opposed to something that really might need to be contributing to the course learning outcomes or the program learning outcomes. So hence my statement there, Carol, too, as to what do we need to tie up a CMS for, a curriculum management system for, and what might we need to relegate outside of it that could operate in a potentially different LMS, CMS, training system, lines of things, so that it doesn't become too messy, because sometimes too, whatever we put into a CMS has a reporting element to it. And don't we know that also from a government perspective in Australia, that there's way more monitoring of all of the things that are happening within our CMSs and the taxi sides of things, all of the above that are overlaid here now. So we're trying to just work out where our fit is, Carol, I suppose.
We've got a couple of different universities that are exploring this very thing that we're working with, and we think there are ways to create fairly definitive dividers, if you will, between what may be a micro-credential that's not credit-bearing and what's not, because you're right, the TEXA, the QApp, whoever your regulatory body is, it is an issue there. So I think it's really a matter of parsing out what it is. Keeping some things out of your curriculum management system may be the solution, and it's something you talk about. Ideally, though, you would want to build from the bottom up, so from the tiniest component, which may be, as Jeff said, a badge that may be considered for RPL later on, that may then fold into something that is fully a micro-credential. And I think your example of an elective, which could be treated a lot more lightly, is a good one. But you still would want, at the same time, to have that absolute ability to track and map and go through all the rest of the continuous assurance, even for our micro-credentials, I think, as we move on. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
So we have about 5 minutes left to this session, and I guess this has been just an amazing discussion. I guess one question I'm just going to throw out there is, do you have a wish list? Is there something that you're looking for or looking forward to in terms of digitizing the management of your curricula? Is there kind of something that you're working towards, or something that you would like to achieve as you go down this path? Oh, Jenny?
Look, I think the greatest challenge really is to be able to have analyses of the data. It's all very well to collect data, it's how we use it. So I think it's having the software, but also the people with the knowledge and the skills to analyse the data, and then have the knowledge to know who to work with and how to do something about it. So I think that's probably the greatest challenge going forward, is getting those analyses. I mean, we have a system, rapid reports. I don't know if that's something that you other universities have, and that's really helpful for providing some information. But I think we need training of academic and other staff and how to use it in terms of having assessment knowledge and pedagogical knowledge if we're looking to use it to improve systems. Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the challenge for us is actually having our people use these things in ways that actually have an impact. So I think actually the problem to be solved is what would most help academics to use a curriculum management or curriculum mapping tool in a way that will actually help them improve their own unit. What would be helpful to them? So, and I'm not sure I know the answer to that question offhand, but I think it would be a good question to be able to answer.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that's very true. We won't have time to get to Jeff's initial question, but I think it's a very interesting one, and maybe in the tone, I guess, of finalizing it, one of the very first things Jeff said in the chat was, I'm also interested in the return on investment in terms of quantitative and qualitative benefits for a CMS. And that is ongoing discussion everywhere, definitely, Jeff, not just at the University of Canberra. And I wondered if any of our colleagues here might have just sort of a brief way to address that, or is it a topic for a further conversation among colleagues in this area, or both?
Well, I see a comment here from Jenny that she really is looking for systems that are accessible, user-friendly, and have benefits for both staff and students. And then, Jeff has just added in that if the CMS reduced time, the time to market for new offerings, this would be a really great benefit. I think this just about brings our discussion to a close. I know people have spent a wonderful hour with us discussing this topic. Carol, would you like to just wrap up with some final comments?
I think really final comments. Certainly there's more to discuss, and happy to have that further conversation, Jeff, maybe around another group of colleagues or similar. I'd be happy to facilitate that. One of the things that I've heard that I think there's been a shift in the curriculum management field, if that's a term, is that it started out being very much registrars and IT. And what I'm hearing now is the absolute criticality of involving our teaching and learning. A number of the universities that are using Akari have it firmly centered in the teaching and learning centers rather than as an administrative system. And I think it's marrying the pedagogy with the functionality of curriculum management that is really where we're getting to the heart of things. It seems to be the last frontier in academic technologies. Everything else has been well digitized for years, and we've finally gotten to this one. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. It's very, very enlightening to listen to what you've had to say. Joyce?
Yes, thank you so much to everyone, and thank you to Carol and Blackboard. I hope that we can continue discussion another time, because it seems like there's a lot more that we can go into. So thank you again for spending the hour with us, and I hope to see all of you soon, in person even, maybe.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be great? Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.